So folks, today we're talking about a genre-defining game for the 90s, so I hope you stay a while and listen. Developed by Blizzard Entertainment, which you might know from Rock and Roll Racing and Lost Vikings, I guess, and released in 1996, Diablo is actually pretty different from what you might expect if you've only heard of the sequels. You see, Diablo, it's got some great sprite work, simple gameplay, an easy to follow plot, and crushing atmosphere, but it's not the loot fest of its sequels. But still, it's a great game, and like all great works, it's kinda hard to break it down in pieces to examine the whole, but it's what we're gonna do because it's easier that way. As I said, nowadays the franchise's name invokes the image of grinding for hours upon hours, killing grotesque monsters, only to get showered in gold. Oh god, I didn't mean it that way. Still, showered in magic items. Yeah, let's go with that. Fuck, yes, you asked. Well, that's not what Diablo 1 is really about, though. It's more of a casual roguelike, which, yeah, I know, but it removes the permadeath element and I love the clunky interface in favor of more accessibility, which actually makes it a pretty great entryway into gaming as a whole. It's still, however, crushingly, brutally, terrifyingly difficult. A CBT difficulty, if you will. Wait a second. We'll be breaking down the gameplay elements, assuming a viewer who's totally new to games, alright? Meaning that if you're like me and play like 10 hours a day, you can skip this part. There's gonna be a timestamp somewhere. Before you truly start playing, you have to create your character, having a pick of 3 classes to choose from. The warrior is a big bulky bear who specializes in melee combat. The rogue's a balanced class with a focus on archery, and the sorcerer is the sorcerer. He does sorcery, you know, magic and shit. Each class has different speeds for the favorite methods of attack, different min and max stats, a unique exclusive skill, which is innate to them, and different starting equipment. This is all pretty basic for the genre that Diablo spawned. What makes this first game different from the rest is that there are no extensive skill trees for each class. The warrior never learns to charge with his shield through hordes of enemies, and the rogue never learns explosive arrows, and all of the spells are learned via tomes that you either find or buy. After character creation, you'll be dropped in the hub, the village of Tristram, which is where we'll be doing most of our character management. There you can find a blacksmith, who buy and sell weapons as well as repair your equipment, a healer, who can heal you fully and also sells potions and stat boosting elixirs, a witch, who sell you spell tomes, scrolls, mana potions, as well as staves, the arcane, who will identify items for you for a fee, and Wirt, a little shit who'll charge you 50 gold just to look at what he has in his inventory, much less buy it. The town is also home to a host of other characters, many of which will give you quests, all of which are completed by going down to the underground mazes filled with monsters which now haunt the settlement. That's what most of the game consists of. Killing shit, getting experience points, getting gold, getting equipment, not letting your health drop to 0 because if it does you die. And just leveling up, which increases your health, your mana, which you use to cast spells, and gives you 5 attribute points that you can distribute as you see fit. Every piece of equipment you find, as well as every spell you can learn, has minimum requisite stats. So, a pretty wide variety of builds is possible, even though you're likely to stick to what your class does best. Warriors will equip swords, maces, and axes, as well as shields, and fight enemies in melee, with each weapon class having with each weapon category having its own bonuses and penalties. Rogues will fire at enemies from afar with a bow and arrow, as well as cast supportive spells, and sorcerers will be absolute dead weight until the late game where they get some screen clearing bullshit. When your grid-based inventory fills up, it's time to return to Tristan and sell all that trash. You can either manually walk all the way back, or you can cast a spell at Town Portal, which will lead you directly back to town. Scrolls of TP are cheap enough, and you only ever need one of them at the end anyways, so it's a good idea to always buy one from Nadra the Witch. Every time the dungeon tileset changes, you can find stairs that lead directly back to town, and these serve as permanent markers of your progress. There are 16 floors in total, and they are all randomly generated, filled with an assortment of monsters and treasure for you to find. Controls are simple, involving almost exclusively the use of the mouse. You left click to attack, to move, interact with NPCs, open up chests, pick up items, etc. And you right click to cast your spells, or to use your class's ability. Use of the keyboard is mostly for hotkeys, with which you can easily access your inventory, your character sheet, spell selection screen, your automatically completing map, and your quick bar, in which you can store up to 8 different potions or spell scrolls that you can access with your number keys. You can also hold down Shift and click with your left mouse button or your right one to attack in place, which is useful for holding down choke points and clearing crowds of enemies. It's an easy enough game to learn to control, with its difficulty coming not from requiring precise aiming, or learning intricate combos with a lot of frame data, but rather from knowing when to attack and when to bravely run away like Sir Robin. Each class has a selection from the same pool of spells, which are learned either from tomes or from special shrines that you can find in the dungeon, and have minimum requirements on the magic attributes. And since classes have different cutoff points for those attributes, that means that the warrior will have a hard late game experience considering how essential spells are for that part of the game. Mana doesn't regenerate, and unlike health, there are no NPCs in town who restore it for free, which means that you will rely mostly on potions. And there are certain spells that you can learn, such as Mana Shield, which makes damage be first detected from your mana rather than your health, and Stone Curse, which petrifies enemies in place, which are real game changers, and will completely change the way that you play the game in the second half.
Game changers. Change the way that you play the game.
Particularly in the final 4 floors of the dungeon. When playing as a warrior, your fast melee strikes, high health pool, and uses of a shield to block enemy strikes makes for a very easy early game, until you meet the butcher, that is.
Fresh meat.
Meanwhile, the sorcerer's vast array of spells, as well as being able to exploit the MS no stun bug, makes for a much easier late game, when in the earlier levels of the dungeon, you have limited mana and your staffs don't have a lot of spell charges, meaning that you have to rely a lot on melee combat, which you aren't very good at. The rogue, on the other hand, will have a mostly even experience all throughout the game, so long as you remember to keep your distance, since she fires pretty fast with her bow. Regardless, you will struggle a lot of the game, especially as you descend further and further into the dungeon, as enemies come in far greater numbers, as well as having way more health and dealing way more damage. Diablo's difficulty is essential to its experience. Mechanics are the language of games, and Diablo's design being simple yet elegant, but also brutal and unforgiving, are the absolute perfect prose to this game's narrative. Look, I'm not gonna get into the 50 billion pages of backstory and lore that Diablo later got, since most of that material is post-1 anyway, and it retcons a lot of stuff from this first game, which, in my opinion, makes it way more generic and less remarkable. All that really matters is that you're an ex-resident of the town of Tristram, returning home to deal with the monster-infested tunnels, after an evil archbishop reduced the devil in the church's basement. There's more to the plot, a lot more, but this is what really hooks you in, and it's what most players will really know. Throughout your descent, you can find tomes which give you more lore, such as explaining the hierarchy of the Burning Hells, or how the primevals came to banish to the world of Sanctuary, but none of that is really important, and you can safely ignore it, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that most players will never find that stuff out anyways. What really matters is that there's a bunch of innocent people trapped in a town, too poor to afford relocating, and at the mercy of an inscrutable evil. And boy, do the visuals and sound design reflect that perfectly. The very first thing that you'll hear when you start a new game is the theme of Tristram, and just take a listen, it's gonna be on the background. It just builds up so much dread, but it's also kinda hopeful, and it perfectly encapsulates the game's atmosphere. And although I'm not of the opinion that voice acting really improves games, since strong writing can shine through even in text boxes, and for real, like, bad acting can completely ruin a good script.
Jason! Jason! Jason!
But I'd really be remiss not to bring up the dialogue in this game. Just have a listen to Farn the Drunk when you bring up the Butcher.
And a fellow drinking peace? Big cleaver, killing all my friends. Couldn't stop him, had to run away. Couldn't save them. Trapped in a room with so many bodies, so many friends. No!
That's some gut-wrenching shit. And it definitely illustrates how, although you might be a powerful warrior or a questing magician, most of the Tristramites are just farmers and craftsmen, forcing you to fight for their lives against things that they really cannot comprehend. The rest of the NPCs are a friendly bunch.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun.
Well, what can I do for you? Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
What ails you, my friend?
Good day. How may I serve you?
Psst, over here.
And a fellow drinking peace?
I sense a soul in search of answers.
They're ready to heal you, give you wisdom, or sell you items, even if they cannot do it for free. They're trapped in a hostile environment, putting all their hopes in a random adventure to vanquish the evil that haunts their every nightmare. Each NPC has a good number of lines, not only related to their quests, but also general gossip, which helps characterize them and make them stand out as unique. Even Wirt, the little shit that he is, has enough sympathetic qualities to make me overlook how much he overcharged me for his useless garbage. The game's art direction really brings about the impressive atmosphere. Everything's either blue or grey or brown, except for the vivid red blood and the shine of lava and acid on their lower levels. The monsters have pretty great designs, all knotted and visceral, layers upon layers of swollen muscle, and they all have some pretty gruesome and gory death animations. The characters themselves are also fairly good, evoking a very quintessential look for each class. I'd also point out that the Sorcerer is maybe the first canonically black character in an RPG. I'm not quite sure of this, but he's at the very least the first one that I've seen, and I kinda really appreciate that. Even if the ethnic magician is kind of an outdated trope and has some problematic roots. Actually, the tone is set as soon as you boot up the game, as you get a CG intro that I swear was super impressive for its time. Crumbling homes, ruined buildings, reddened skies, demonic creatures on the prowl, and ravens pecking the eyes of corpses. It lets you know right off the bat what you're in for and exactly what kind of game this is gonna be. Helping with the feeling of unease and powerlessness is the fact that much of the gear that you find in the church is like actual garbage. I mean, for fuck's sake, your club is a 2x4 with a nail driven through it, and you'll be dressing in crappy capes and literally tattered clothing, which does nothing to contribute to your defense. This might be the only game in which equipping padded armor was a step up from what I had previously. However, the ending more than makes up for it. You see, Diablo never actually was able to manifest physically into Sanctuary, possessing and warping the body of Prince Albrecht, who's still a child. So, with no way to be rid of him, the hero takes his soul stone, which is the stone that contains his soul. Yeah, it's a very subtle name, I know. And they jam it into their own forehead, hoping their will to be strong enough to contain the archdemon. but it isn't. And they fail. Oh, que distraí. Vai pra cama, pentelho. It's a fitting ending to the game. All your victories amount to nothing, because in trying to become the new seal for Diablo, you just given away out of prison. And I like how the sequel just straight up has Tristram be burned to the ground, with Deckard Cain being the only survivor. 3 would retcon a lot of that, but we'll talk about 3 and its many retcons when we talk about 3 and its many retcons. I'd be remiss not to bring up Hellfire, the non-canonical expansion made by a third-party developer. It's fine. It adds 1 new class, with 2 more being hidden in the code, a new page of spells, most of which are cut content, and 8 new dungeon floors, running concurrently with levels 9 to 16, which are inhabited by a bunch of new monsters, most of which are cut content as well. Like I said, it's just fine. I like the quality of life stuff that they added, like an amulet that doubles the amount of gold per stack, or the ability to run in town, but the new content is just kinda bad. It feels like generic Dungeons and Dragons style high fantasy, rather than the gothic religious horror of the base game. Think of it less as a real expansion pack and more like a professionally produced mod. Still, Hellfire comes packed in with the GOG version of Diablo, which is the best version to get on modern systems, so give it a go. Suffice it to say, despite its age, Diablo 1 remains a fantastic game and well worth checking out. It actually spawned a whole genre of loot-driven action RPGs, most of which are also dark fantasy, like Path of Exile and Green Dawn. But its brutal difficulty, oppressive atmosphere, and bleak tone also makes it a predecessor to another entire genre. If you rearrange the 4 tile sets, make them completable in any order, and add a final boss to each floor, you have something very similar to From Software's Demon's Souls, which has spawned the whole plague of Souls-likes we're drawing in today. Don't like the fact that Diablo gets harrowing and stop you from giving it a try though. It's the kind of game that, while hard, anyone can finish so long as you get used to things like kiting. The randomized nature of the game means that no 2 playthroughs will be the same, with even the quests that you complete being chosen from a pool every time you start a new save. And if you could make it, that's fine. What matters is that you gave it a go and got to appreciate the artistry that went into making the music, the sprites, the voice work, and the writing. So that's it for today, folks. Stay safe and till next time. Fudeu.